Hi everyone, my name's Emma. I'm a senior at LACS. My poems are on the topic of feminism, women, gender roles, things like that. The first is titled Lucky. If you are the type of girl that men like to look at, give them nothing to see. Bundle up in early autumn, leave your hair unbraided, your lashes uncurled, hide your shape. Wear your jeans 2 sizes too big, cut the padding from your breasts so that the men will look away. If you are the type of girl that men like to touch, give them nothing to feel. Wash your face with harsh soaps, let your hair drip with oil, each strand splitting in 2. Make yourself rough. Grow a dark forest on your legs and a thicket at your sex, so that the men will not touch you. If you are the type of girl that men want to love, you are lucky. Give them something to love. This next piece is called Haircut. A child is born, gray skin and no hair, not yet breathing. Spank her, not gently. She takes her first breath. 2 children, side by side, short black hair and baby soft skin. She wearing yellow, a bow in her hair. He in overalls and a baseball cap. Daddy's little man. A girl goes to school, still a child, but with budding breasts and flowing hair. Her father's friends look at her too closely. She has a woman's figure. A girl walks down the street, still a child, but she fills out that top so well. With baby soft skin, she moisturizes it, and long blonde hair, she bleaches it. Men turn their heads. She walks a little faster. A girl goes to school, still a child, but she feels eyes on her neck, the nape of her neck, exposed. A brand new black pixie cut. Dyke. This next piece is titled Giada, which means grandmother. It's about family. The song is loud, methodical, repetitive, melodic. I hear voices, many voices, both familiar and alien, an accent, curling words around her tongue, striving to be heard and understood. She knows all the words. I watch her singing, her head moving softly, carefully, swaying atop her body that is old and heavy and drank too much in her 20s. She asks me if I love Jesus. I don't have the heart to say no. But this song moves through her and into me, and now I am swaying too. I feel that weight in my bones, as though she is inside of me, on top of me, surrounding me like music. She asks me if I'm happy here. And those voices rise around me, this one sweet and that one low. I hear the voices that came before me, that came alongside me, that spread their roots across this world, that made their homes in little bottles, sending words across the ocean, receiving them. Her eyes are black and see so much. She wants to know about my heart, about this song that I do not know the words to. She asks me questions I do not know how to answer. She asks me if I'm happy here. I do not know which here she is referring to. We have lived a long time on this earth. She counts back in decades now, 20, 40, 80 years. She asks me if I love Jesus. My final piece has two parts. As of now, it's untitled. The sun peeks out from behind the tree line, a mother poking her head through my door as if to say, "I hope you're being good in there." I turn my back to her, face the dark figure that splays out before me, my own body laid out in the dirt. I raise the bottle to my lips and pour a steady stream of fire down my throat. The liquor disinfects me, cleans me out. I wonder how much of the good in me goes with it. I raise my other hand, a lit cigarette in my grasp, and inhale, long and slow. Maybe one day, the volatile alcohol will catch fire in my mouth, ignited by the glowing tip of my cigarette. There are worse ways to die. And when I die, I leave behind all the suffering, all the anger and loss and lust and fear of this life. I am reborn, a single blade of grass, billowing like the gentle willow in the wind, until man, the eternal aggressor, cuts me down or stamps me out. Then, perhaps I am a blue jay, flying high, my body blending with the sky, also blue, but not like me, bigger, more expansive. But then, am I not expansive too? Every leaf, every bird, the man that stamps me out as grass is me as well.
I'm Fiona. I'm a junior at LACS. I have two pieces. They're kind of vignettes or short stories, and they're both about childhood and memories and such. Yeah. So the first one is called General Store. The little general store on the corner of Garrett and 89 sits in silence, lifeless, untouched. Windows broken and boarded up, the paint that once pristinely spelled in large letters groceries is chipping and fading. Desolate, lonely. In the eyes of the girl sitting in the passenger seat of a used red Subaru driving past, the slightly crooked store holds brighter images, ones that flash in and out of her mind in quick succession. Memories, those of an old man and his old dog. In her mind they are always old, tired but content. The old dog, a large, boxy yellow lab, whose great paws always lie resting on the cement right outside the store door, whose large muzzle tilts calmly up to meet the little hand reaching to pet the top of his head. The old man, a little bent, but tall, big-boned but skinny in his age, prominent nose and white hair in his mid-70s. Grumbling, gruff, and opinionated, but kind-hearted, a nice man. He and the dog rarely seem to cross paths, the old man behind the counter, the old dog outside the open door. But the old man speaks fondly of the dog, and they have a strong bond, and don't seem to need all the words in the world for them to both know it. The store is even smaller inside than you would guess from the outside. A wooden counter, an upright glass-doored fridge, a white chest freezer in the corner. Next to the door, a rack of different newspapers. The only one remembered is the New York Times, bought on many Sundays. There are several shelves of useful things for a rural life. Maybe charcoal and matches or fishing equipment, but memories falter on what is there. As in the eyes of the girl sitting in the passenger seat, the most important things are the ice cream sandwiches that the little store always promises for her. The ice cream sandwiches are at the bottom of the white chest freezer, next to ice and other unmemorable frozen items. They are sold individually, wrapped in white, shiny, paper-like material, and at the little store there are ice cream sandwiches with chocolate ice cream inside, to the delight of the girl in the passenger seat and her older brother. The chest freezer is too deep to reach over, let alone to see over, and so the girl's father always takes them out. Looking up and seeing her father paying at the wooden counter, paying for gas in a handheld red plastic tank just pumped from a gas pump to the side of the store. Or so the girl sitting in the passenger seat has always been told, as she has never seen it. paying for the New York Times, whose front page headlines had been skimmed before being idly grabbed, and paying for the sweet ice cream sandwiches in their shiny white, paper-like packaging. Days pass and the store stays open, when it is robbed by the old man's troubled young nephew, when the old man falls ill and worries about who will take care of the old dog. The store stays open when the old man comes back, with more of a tremor in his hand, and when the old dog dies, and the old man's eyes fill with tears. The store stays open for a year after the old dog dies, and then closes quietly when the old man goes to live in a home. The old man's red pickup truck no longer parks by the store, the old dog no longer rests his head on the cement outside, the store door no longer opens, and the ice cream sandwiches have been taken away, though perhaps they simply melted into nothingness. The store is lifeless, lonely. Years later, a nest of bees reside in the little store for a long time, but then they are taken to become hives in someone's backyard, and the store is alone again, stripped of its vitality. The red Subaru zips up the hill, and the girl in the passenger seat loses sight of the little store. So this is my second piece. After years, she gets pregnant, and what a happy time it is. Months later, a small, yellow baby is born into the NICU, and what a worrying time it is. And in an email with forced happiness, we learn his name. A name like that of my great-grandfather's, the one they aren't related to and whom I barely knew. But still, it is his name, and the picture of him looks tired and stressed, as if the camera that had taken it was in the hand of someone uncertain and exhausted. Long days later, they are home, and we don't hear much more. In 6 months, they are both back at work. It is Canada. Not because they have to financially, and he is left in a daycare from 8 o'clock until 5:30. He is jostled out the door every early cold morning and hustled back in exhaustion 9.5 hours later. The daycare has softly and sweetly painted walls, primrose pink and chipped down yellow, and the toys are pretty blocks with the edges sanded down, though rarely will they be touched by small hands, unable yet to grasp. In New York City, her brother and his wife have just had a baby girl, after years of trying. They are elated but strangely unaware, and we learn the baby's name in a phone call, the first in a while, and her middle name is a name like that of my great-grandmother's, the one we aren't related to, and whom I barely knew. She is beautiful, ruined only by the enormous bow placed upon her head in the photo we see in an email. 3 months later, they are both back at work, not because they have to financially, and she too is brought to a daycare, with the woman who isn't her mother nor her father, and as they leave, her blue eyes follow them with a longingness her little hands and mine cannot grasp. When we meet her for the first time, we sit in a circle, and she crawls to every stranger as readily as she does her own mother. Across town, their half-sister's stepbrother and his wife have a long-awaited baby. He is happy and she is not, and we learn the baby's name from a source once removed, and it is a name I do not have any connection with that I can stretch to meet him. When we do meet him, he has a big blue helmet on his small head, a helmet to reshape his head that has been flattened from lying on his back too much. In 3 months, they had failed to hold their baby enough, and they both go back to work, not because they have to financially, and he's left in his nanny's arms as they walk out the door. Soon the nanny will put him down to get something, and he will not be able to turn his head to see her in his big blue helmet. He is soon introduced to a new sister, whose name sounds like that of a perfume company, and neither of them are very happy. In less than 3 months, she too is left with the nanny, and shifts her brown eyes to a closing door and the backside of an expensive coat. In Canada, a couple of years later, a new baby arrives, with fewer health problems than the first, and soon they go home. In an email, we are introduced to a sweet face, and we learn his name. Not a name I can place, but one I love. They shower him with love and stress, and his older brother tries to hurt him over and over again. In 6 months, they go back to work and leave him all day with a mother who has a similarly aged child. He is motionless and silent as they leave. Streets away, his brother is having trouble speaking in full sentences, but is learning to read. Everything is taken care of, the children provided for, taken and left here and there, because what is the importance of seeing them awake anyway? In New York City, her brother's wife is pregnant again, and she is vaguely unhappy. Soon they find out they will be having twin boys, and there is no longer anything vague about her unhappiness. Across town, we haven't heard anything in months. I was born at home in the midst of a cozy winter storm. My father stayed home with me and my older brother for years, and my mother stayed at work because she had to financially. She worked as a college professor, which allowed for enough time to be home for half of the week, and many of the time she took me to her office when she did not want to be apart. There is no one correct way to raise a child or provide for them, but I do know that in Canada he still tries to hurt his brother and punches other children at school. That in New York City there is no happiness or excitement surrounding the unborn twins, and across town from them that love is lacking. I know that I am who I am today because of my parents' loving commitment and choices, and I wonder what can be more important, even as someone who currently cares not for new human beings, than one's child, and what kind of financially unnecessary work can take precedence over them.
My name's Bailey. I'm a senior at ACS. My first piece is called Stolen Bliss. Stolen bliss, bliss just the same. I am still shocked when you stoop so low. Call me anything you want, it's nothing I haven't heard before. Nothing you, all blissed out, haven't said before. Victim blaming sounds so strange coming from another victim. Hypocrite's too small a word these days. The next one's Untitled. Her hugs hurt my back. Soft hands with sharp nails, I didn't know I love you could tear through skin like that. Talk of injustice is drowned by her cries for your eyes. Nothing new, but it still aches. This one's called 38.2 seconds. I know what he's gonna do before he does it. I know he will jump before his feet leave the ground. Know he will bark before his throat begins to rumble. Know he won't like that dog even before he sees it. Know he's not gonna pick up that stick because it's pine. Know that the slight difference in my hand signal makes him step back, not sit. Know that the raggedy old monkey is his favorite. Know that when I put the stuffing back in it, he will just pull it out again. Know that he will only sit on the passenger side of the back seat when he rides in the car. Know he'll always welcome me home. Know he isn't going to forget about me when someone new comes along. Know he isn't going to leave. Maybe that's why I always have preferred dogs to humans. They're predictable, loyal, kind-hearted, unconditionally loving. They respect you if you respect them, and there's always a reason behind each of their actions. If you can't find it, look harder. As a kid, I cried when my parents dragged me out of dog crates and made me sleep in a big girl bed. I even tried to pee outside with them once. That did not go over well. When asked what I wanted to be when I grew up, I said I wanted to be a dog. But they always laughed and said no, I wanted to be a vet. A child psychologist asked me to draw my family, and with great detail, I drew my dogs. I didn't want the top bunk because the dogs couldn't get up there. Every birthday party, Halloween costume, face paint, walls covered in pink posters with fluffy puppies and hideous green participation ribbons that I was so proud of. Just walking into the ring was such a big step for a girl that grew up hiding behind her parents' legs. Funny that I'm taller than both of them now. Now, canine anatomy posters and dream vet schools with stunning canine cognition labs cover my walls, but is this dream my dream? I go over the bones head to tail as I fall asleep. Maxilla, mandible, orbital, frontal. It's good to know the base. If I'm not asleep after that, I go over what holds it all in place, what pumps the blood where, hope I fall asleep before I get to the organs because I always get sidetracked on the lymph nodes. Jump out of bed and grab my phone, start researching, looking, hoping, praying to a God I don't believe in, but all the links are purple. Google's way of telling me I've already looked there. But I look again because there must be something I'm missing, something the doctors just looked over. There has to be some new chemo drug. Maybe today was the day someone cured lymphoma. I look and I look, but I find nothing new. I've been looking every night for a year, trying to save him and failing, haunted by anxiety dreams where he dies because I didn't do enough to save him. I remember on my 6th birthday, I was crying because the lifespan of all of his breeds averaged is 12 years. I couldn't believe that his life was half over and didn't want to think that one day I'd live in a world without him. I was scared by how fast the first 4 years went and just wanted time to slow down. I remember our first time in the agility ring. His run was over 7 minutes, judges' hands flying through the air signaling each deduction. We came in dead last, but I was happy, gave him a big hug and a hot dog. I didn't care about our placement because we had fun. Nobody thought we could do it, run a normal time. Teddy never moved faster than a trot, and I was so young. But we were determined and trained for years. At his last show, he ran 38.2 seconds. The judge's hands were motionless at her side the whole time. We got first. I'm glad I didn't know then that this would be his last show, and I wish I didn't know now. My last piece is called Not Today, Not Today. I want to scream all my hate at you. I want to punch you hard, right in your nose, make you cry. I want to hurt you as bad as you hurt me. If I have to ache like this, so do you. An eye for an eye, right? No, because I don't want your eye. I don't actually want to see you hurt. Really, I can't stand to see much more hurt. And seeing you hurt doesn't fix my hurt. I would never wish this kind of hurt on anyone, even you. This world is filled with so much hate and anger, and the thought of further perpetuating that makes me sick. See, I can't hurt you like you hurt me because I can't bear to know that I steeped as low as you, or to think that I was so naive as to believe I could mend my wounds with the tears of my enemies. No. I will not seek revenge. I will not let this bitter me or break me. From wounds flowers will grow, and clenched fists will drip with the sweetest of honey, and as the hurt drains, so will the hate, and I will rise once again, stronger.
My name is Anna Molina, and I am reading a short story I wrote a few months ago. It's called The Beauty of Tide Pools. The day Annie's father began drawing pictures after work was the same day he shaved his beard. She found out his new artistic habit when her phone pinged a text message from him, a picture of a bug and a bird on a tree. It looked identical to pictures Annie drew in 3rd grade, and she laughed and laughed at it. She didn't know what to make of it and could not stop thinking about how vaguely juvenile the drawing was. She didn't want to stop thinking about it, though. Her father's face without a beard was jarring. The absence of gray hair showed how his chin jutted out and dimpled, and she stared incredulously when he came out of the bathroom. "What?" he said when he saw her staring. It was like looking at her father as a young boy, or in an alternate universe. She couldn't believe that was the face that had been underneath the beard her whole life. Her mom had hated his beard. She said it was like ivy on the side of an old house that needed some weeding. She hadn't said this to his face, had whispered it to Annie at a dinner party when Annie's father was getting a little too loud, gesticulating with a glass of wine swirling in one of his giant hands. "Doesn't your father's beard look like ivy on an old stone house that hasn't had any upkeep recently?" It was one of the weirdest things Annie had ever heard her mother say, especially because she was not the metaphorical type, although she did grow up in an old house covered in ivy. Annie knew she wouldn't have said that in a different environment. Her mom had been laughing stiffly with her dad's friends, a cup of black coffee sitting before her in place of red or white wine. Whenever alcohol continued to be casually drunk after dinner, Annie's mother's posture would worsen, and she'd request cup after cup of coffee, which probably did wonders for her anxiety. Annie's mother never spoke again about her distaste for unkempt beards, but she did wave her feelings about alcohol around like they were a huge flag. She made it very clear to Annie and her older sister from a young age that drinking alcohol was a bad thing, and that she'd found enlightenment when she'd left substance behind and followed God's path. Neither Annie nor her older sister had followed God's path, and they never spoke to each other about alcohol. In fact, they acted as though alcohol wasn't the reason why their mother was taking a break from living with their dad. On Wednesday, Annie's sister Chelsea came home from college for spring break, and their mother came over for dinner to catch up. They made chicken and peas and potatoes, and Annie made bread rolls for fun. They made extra salad and set the table before her mom got there. "How's Dad doing?" Chelsea asked, sending her eyes over to their dad, who hummed and peeked into the oven. Annie shrugged. She didn't know the answers to these types of questions. After all, he shaved his beard, so she didn't think she really knew who he was. The doorbell rang, and her dad dropped a pan as Annie went to get it. Their mom came in loudly. "Hi, sweetie," she said when Chelsea came over. Annie's father casually walked out of the kitchen, and when her mom caught sight of his hairless face, her eyes grew wide. "Wow, Charles," she said, "I never expected you to do that." He shrugged, the back of his neck red, when he turned around. They all sat down to dinner. Their mom helped herself to a small serving of chicken and extra salad. They ate their food on mismatched plates, and they talked about Chelsea's classes and friends. "Well, I thought you would have taken more English classes," her mom said as she stuck her fork into a cucumber. Chelsea rolled her eyes but didn't say anything. During dinner, Annie liked to imagine what it would be like to live in a house of her very own, with matching plates and forks. She imagined how she'd make the environment feel, the candles she'd light. She'd invite her friends over for dinner and cook soup on Sundays. She pushed her food around on her plate, clenching her jaw as a dull headache tapped at her temples. "Annie, are you listening?" Annie's mother said sharply, nudging her. "Yes," she responded automatically, shoving a fork full of peas into her mouth. "Well, I asked him, and obviously his house is nice," Annie's father said. "Chelsea, remember the crab you brought inside when you were little, and it pinched you?" Chelsea laughed stiffly. "Wait, what?" Annie asked. Her mom rolled her eyes. Her dad looked at her. "Remember that colleague of mine with the house on the college's research island?" "Remember when you were scalped by that seagull?" Chelsea interrupted. Their dad frowned and impulsively rubbed the back of his head. "It was a freak attack. It won't happen this time." "Wait, so are we going back to the island?" Annie asked. "Like, seriously, we're all just going back there over break?" "What's the problem?" Annie's mother said. "It's just for a few days." Annie's dad nodded. Chelsea wouldn't meet her eyes. "I guess I just don't see what the point is," she said. "For family time," her mother said brightly. "I need more time with you girls." Her dad nodded. Chelsea didn't say anything, and Annie shoved more food into her mouth. Over the next few days, they all packed up her dad's sedan and drove out to the coast of Maine, where they took a small boat out to the island. Annie watched the congealed algae on the surface of the water churn as the motor started up, like some sort of putrid soup that she kept her eyes trained on as they pulled away from the pier. The boat picked up speed, debris in the water flashing past them as they bumped over the choppy waves. Her parents stood at the front of the boat, talking to others. Eventually, they broke off and stood side by side at the bow. She couldn't tell if they were speaking in low voices or simply watching the tiny island in the distance, which loomed bigger and greener with every jolt of the tiny boat. She couldn't fathom why they thought it was a good idea to return to this place, so festering with seagulls and past ideations. "Hi," someone said, and Annie turned to see a smiley girl standing next to her, accompanied by another 2 girls and a boy. "Are you a student?" Annie smiled and shook her head. "I'm a senior in high school. My sister is, though, but she doesn't go to Cornell." Annie turned and pointed to her sister across the boat, who held an iPhone and tapped the camera button for a grinning couple. "Oh, that's cool," the girl said. "Are you visiting with her?" "Family vacation," Annie said with a grimace, and the others smiled sympathetically. "We used to come here all the time as kids." "Oh, so you've been here before?" Annie spent the rest of the boat ride talking with the college students, all biology and ecology majors. She pointed her dad out to them, who stood at the bow long after her mom had left. She answered all their questions about the layout of the island and forgot to check the time as the boat pulled them closer. Once to shore, Annie stepped out onto the pale, chipped rocks. Annie didn't spend any time waiting for the others, instead climbed the small hill and looked out over the stupid small island. From her vantage point, she could see the tall building she used to call the Watchtower. The big house on the other side was the one they would stay in. The flowers were starting to grow in the gardens, dapples of pink and yellow and green. She could see seagull nests in between the rocks. In the boat there had been an overpowering scent of fish, but up on the hill the air was clean and fresh. She stretched her hands over her head and took a deep breath. "Annie, what are you doing? Come back and carry this stuff," her mother called from below. Annie dropped her eyes to the gull-shit-covered rocks and went back to join her family and the college students. Together, they heaved their bags up the hill. Everybody ate a healthy dinner together under an awning in one of the common spaces. On one of the walls inside was a painting of a 2-scale blue whale. Annie remembered being small and marveling at it, saying, "It's 100 feet long," to nobody's astonishment. She ate with her new acquaintances at one of the long tables. Chelsea sat across from her and talked with one of the boys in length about parabolas. Annie had almost forgotten how good her sister was at math. She liked that Chelsea talked so fast that the boy had to blink a couple times before responding. Annie caught a glimpse of her mother, standing in the corner of the room and talking with some research guy. She was smiling widely, and Annie could tell it was genuine because her top gums were visible. "Who is that lady?" someone said in undertone, and Annie barely glimpsed at him before responding, "That's my mom." He dragged his eyes from her mom to Chelsea and then back to hers. Similar to Annie forgetting her sister's math skills, she often forgot how beautiful her mother was. That night, they all went back to the big house. The house was raised, and the kitchen and living room were in one open space. The windows looked out over the ocean. Her mom and dad were laughing in the kitchen while she read. Her mother turned to open her root beer, and her dad took a brief swig from his flask, as if her mother didn't know he had it. The last time her parents had been in the kitchen together, Annie's mother had smashed all the plates in the sink on the floor. She remembered hearing the crash and tinkle of each plate exploding on the linoleum. Her dad stood upright as the pile of shards at his feet grew larger. He didn't say a word. When Annie's mother saw no reaction from him, she grabbed the wine glass from his left hand and smashed that as well. He went and got a broom. The next day, Annie went with him to the Salvation Army, and they repurchased each plate for 75 cents. A week later, her mom left, since she couldn't stand the mismatched plates. Annie remembered writing in her journal, "Some things aren't meant to be," over and over again, so she wouldn't forget. Annie shook her head and cracked her neck. She looked through the corners of her eyes at Chelsea. She was reading intently, her eyes moving back and forth. Annie got up and went to bed, and awoke much too early to seagulls screaming outside of her window. That day, the four of them accompanied a few college students down to some of the tide pools. The pools were secluded between two hills, and thankfully free of seagulls. Chelsea found a crowd like in the old days, and Annie found several beautiful rocks. Her mother squatted by a tide pool, watching it closely and running her fingers over something. She'd always said she could have been an ecologist. She looked years younger when she was before a tide pool. The water and speckled sand reflected in her eyes, and a dimple deepened in her cheek the longer she sat. Annie's father stood farther away, like a giant in the miniature village of pools, taking pictures of algae with the students. His red hair was like a fire in the green-blue beige surroundings. Annie laughed at the thought, and Chelsea looked up at her questioningly. Annie gestured, "Isn't it crazy?" And Chelsea cocked her head to the left. "Just look at them," Annie said. "Look at them." Chelsea stood up to stretch her back. She looked at them. Her mother remained enraptured in the tide pool, her nose almost touching the water, as though she were about to fall in. Her father was still surrounded by the chattering students, like a dog with swollen ticks. Chelsea shrugged. Annie shook her head. "Who the fuck are they?" she asked. Chelsea said, "They're them." Annie looked up at Chelsea's face and noticed her resemblance with them. Annie realized her sister's eyes were wet and stood up to sit atop one of the little hills. She ate a sandwich she packed in her bag and watched the sea and her parents below. A few feet away, a seagull mother regurgitated something into her baby's mouth. The chicks were just leaving their cute phase, their feet too big for their bodies. She always thought they looked like tiny velociraptors. She watched the birds eat for ages, and then looked back down at everyone below, scattered like pieces of colored glass on the beach. Her mother gestured to her, and they all went back to the house because no one else had packed lunch. They were climbing the steps of the house when her mother gave a small gasp. "My ring," she cried, holding her left hand. "It's gone." She turned on her heel and dashed back to the small hills. Chelsea ran after her, and Annie followed. They ran down the hill, splashing back into the water. All the tide pools were the same, the sand shifting and shaking under their feet. They got down on their hands and knees and combed through the mess of everything, Chelsea saying, "Mom, you were over here, right?" Annie found her beautiful discarded rocks and Chelsea's little green crab. She found many other things, but nobody found the ring. They sat hunched for half an hour, their dad eventually joining them at the pools. He spoke softly to her mother as she blinked rapidly, combing furiously through the sand, eventually snapping at him to just be quiet and help me look. A few college students even joined in the search. Annie got her shirt wet pawing through the tide pools. Eventually, her mother stood up. "It's okay," she said. "It's gone." Her dad put his arm around her stiff shoulders, and together they trudged back up the hill. Chelsea's lips were set in a straight line, and she jerked her head at Annie as she followed them a few minutes later. Annie rested her elbows on the edge of the tide pool, and her tired legs gave out beneath her. She felt tears stinging her eyes, but she wasn't exactly sure why. She blinked away the blur, and then she blinked again. At the bottom of the tide pool, nestled next to some sort of lichen and a smooth rock, was the small ring. It sat there, undisturbed, underwater. The water was crystal clear. The sand was beautiful. The ring was shiny. Annie stood up and splashed out of the water, and the others still searching saw her leave and stood up themselves. She ran up the hill and caught up to her family. They stood in a small circle, her mom's tear-stricken face visible as she drew closer. She pulled Annie into a hug, said it was okay, and thanked her for looking. As the four of them walked back in silence, a seagull swooped over their heads, and her dad flinched. He then looked at Annie's mom and said, "Can't believe we lost our symbol of marriage in this shit-filled place." And then, surprisingly, they all laughed and laughed, even though it wasn't funny. They were almost back to the house when they heard distant shouts. Too far away to hear, they turned to see two figures running with a single arm outstretched, something in hand twinkling in the sunlight. Chelsea shaded her eyes. Her dad squinted. Her mom said, "No way." They looked at one another. Annie's mother grabbed Chelsea in her father's arms, and they took off running. Annie stood back and watched them run, and then turned and looked at the swelling ocean. She closed her eyes and inhaled the clean air into her lungs. When she opened her eyes, her parents' faces were turned back to her. They were wearing matching smiles, the top gums showing. Annie felt herself smiling in return, and then she ran to join them.
My name is Enzo, and I'm in the 11th grade at ACS. And my first thing I'm going to read is a poem called Fault Smells. Fault smells. They stink. Reek. Fucking reek. They burn my nostrils with their putrid stenches. Rotting flesh, blackened, smells of soap and oil that stain the skin of those ruminant creatures we butcher and strip for our clothing and meat. I like the disgust I sometimes feel, and I guess I'm not so disgusted now after all this time I've had. Adjustment time, change time. The stench of fall is a smell that hits hard. A sulfuric smell that turns to taste in my mouth and sits there. Then slowly, it sinks down into the pit of my gut, beneath the bile and mucus and partially digested food, shitty pre-cooked bacon, a mayonnaise sandwich, and beef jerky, into the moist cave that is my stomach, but somehow even deeper, in some dark cavernous crook that exists in some forgotten hole deep in my bowels. It pushes violently upwards, trying to force my lunch and bile out into the world for everyone to see. Delicious. Fucking look at it. I'm in love with the smell of sweat and smoke, so strong it makes you gag, and the tears come with it. I beg for the smoke to come. I knock his door, and angrily, quickly, violently, he spits in my face. Only his spit. It's like the putrid smoke of shitty Buck 7 cigars, the flavored kind, and he picks the tobacco out of. Damn his house stink. None of us can breathe now. We're stuck in this chamber we've created, like a bunch of idiots. We burn and moan and scream and yearn for fresh eyes and some dry wood, and our skin blisters and pulls from what's below it, leaving us all demented and disfigured. We look like great big bloody balloons, dripping with some unknown pink fluids, plus dripping from all holes and ungodly places. My throat hurts from screaming now. I breathe it all in and pretend it's something else, somehow. It makes me feel like I'm closer to myself, who I am. I calm down. Time for bed. I giggle, hiccuping laughter from deep in my diaphragm. I sleep sound. I look around. The two large logs cradle my noggin and sagging belly and dick and make my sleep so hellish. I love it. I love it all. I see strong bare backs flex as their owners' arms toil and stress under the weight of the logs they carry, shifting like some magnificent maple shaking in a storm. The first snow of the late fall, the one that makes the air tighten and brings the smell of winter with it, showers flakes down that melt on the struggling naked bodies and in the shaky hot breaths they draw, that push clouds of steam out with them. It wraps the pain around my throat. I sleep soundly. And the other poem I'm going to read is called Sweet, Sweet Honeysuckle. It bleeds. Sinks, hotly deer-like, blending, fading, into the green river, equally as pungent, but sweet. Sweet, sweet honeysuckle, sucking on it and watching, because it grows by the riverside.
I'm Indigo. I'm from LICS. I'm a junior. This first short vignette sort of thing is called Childhood Deaths. Okay. My childhood best friend's sister died last week from a drug-induced heart attack, but it wasn't her fault. She had just gotten a birth control implant stuck into her arm, and those ones that are the size of matches, and the hormones mixed with the chemicals of the ecstasy and her friends made her take late that Saturday night. In the moonlight, she died, and thinking about how it all happened makes me think of her light green hair and the way her comforting, broad woman hips held me up so long ago. I loved her how she was, with all the complexity and whatnot. As I wait for the phone call telling me that it was all some cruel joke, I cry in my Christmas pajamas with hope that maybe time will fix this. Can't someone up there hear my sobbing, my longing, and my need to see her alive one last time? For her to hold me in her grown-up arms, although I am just about as grown as her now. But her embrace would still give me the warm comfort that I need. Deep down I need it, like a drug perhaps. But maybe it's better that she's gone so soon, because life is hell and death is serenity. And I will love her dearly forever. I will hold her image in my wallet. I will burn the picture of her sweet curves in my mind, and the way she called me honey with her big pink lips. With love I let her go, because there really was no way of saving her. I know love cannot help her now, nor did it ever help her. None of our love kept her here. It makes me freeze and stand still and fall because it wasn't her fault, and she didn't do this to herself, and there will forever be something missing. The wrong turn, the easily fixed mistake, that was all, that was what killed her so quickly. Kaya, I will pay tribute to you. I will mourn your lost self. I will cry and I will fall apart. And I will be fucking sad. Because you deserve more than I could have ever given you. You deserve the sky, the sun, and the earth that you worshipped, and I hate myself for not being able to give that to you. Hold me close one more time. Breathe for me one last time. And finally, I just keep remembering that it wasn't your fault. May the earth take you in and let you be at peace. Okay. The second one is a poem I wrote about catcalling and just how being a kid and getting catcalled is weird. It's called Young Woman. Well, I'm a young woman now. My hips are round and my thighs thick. My breasts small but still prominent. When I walk alone, sometimes others stare. When I bend over, sometimes others stare. I was milky-eyed and sun-kissed on my freckled cheeks when I first noticed, when the man in the red pickup truck told me I was beautiful. No poise nor confidence can make me a woman. It's the approval of others that makes me. It's all part of being a woman. It's all part of it, they say. You'll get used to the looks and the way they call you sweetheart. Maybe you serving them drinks makes them feel powerful. And with power comes the right to do anything. And when you look sad, they'll tell you you're prettier when you smile. Why wouldn't someone want a compliment? Well, I'm a young woman now, and those stares are routine. Those comments are normal because I have grown and given away my juvenility to these men who only want to applaud my newfound womanhood. They only want what's best for me and to make me grin with pleasure. Yes, I am a young woman now. Thank you.
My name's Rowan, and this is a short story I wrote called The Storm. October 1901. In a house was a hallway delicately squeezed between upstairs rooms, and if someone were to lay their feet upon this hallway, it would cry, so no one ever did. If someone were to sweep across this hallway, this dark wooden floors, they would find that it was a cold hallway. They might glance at the hallway's walls and see picture frames with a reflective glass wedged inside the intricately carved wood. They might see small holes in the walls where old pictures had hung. The imperfections were carefully painted over, hiding, hoping no one would notice them, and no one ever did. Along the walls there were doors that were always shut. They may have been locked. If someone were to look in, they would find dust and melancholy, but no one ever did. Now, if someone were to walk to the end of this hallway, they would find that there was a door there. This door was like all the other doors. It was a deep wood and smelled of loneliness. This door, however, was not locked, and if someone were to open it, they would find a table. This table was covered by a dusty lace tablecloth and was accompanied by a chair with a woman sitting in it. If someone were to look upon this woman, the first thing they would notice would surely be her beauty. She had pale, youthful skin and a slight rouge on her cheeks. Her lips looked as if they were painted on with the finest of brushes, and her hands were clasped neatly upon her skirt. Her hair was pulled back loosely in a bun atop her delicate head. Her eyes stared blankly at the tablecloth, dead and unblinking through her pale gray irises. She had been sitting in that chair for months now, staring and staring at the table, her chin tilted slightly down, her eyes fixed, no emotion shone through except for a tear now and again, rolling down her tender face onto her breast. The woman saw many things in this tablecloth. She could see worlds of love and loss, and once in a while she might even see something beautiful, like a flower. These flowers would blow gently in the breeze, and children would run through them. The sun would shine on them, and the birds would sing for them, and the children would sing for them too. Rain would sometimes sweep across these flowers, nurturing their brilliant colors and kind appearances. One day, the rain in the tablecloth intensified, gushing out of the clouds in a giddy frenzy. It clung to the children's hair until they could no longer see, and they stumbled into each other, screaming, shrieking through the thunder. When the storm cleared, the children picked their way through the fallen branches in an attempt to find the road home. They stumbled and bumped into one another, agitated and flustered and confused. One of them tripped over a depression in the road and fell, bruising her knee. Agitated, she scolded the ground, yelling, "If you trip me one more time, I'll surely have you beheaded." The other two children looked at her through scared eyes, each thinking it was them who had done her wrong. She scowled at them, stomping over the pothole and violently brushing past their scared little shoulders, shuddering in their sunny day clothes. They were soaked to the bone and so very cold. The second child stumbled after the first, tripping over a stone and tumbling into a low-hanging branch. His face was scratched by the limb, and it stung. Flustered, he looked around at his companions to see if either of them had caught his tumble. With glistening eyes, he saw that they had, and now they had momentarily forgotten their troubles to laugh at him. "No one laughed at her when she fell," he said, pointing at the bruised knee. His face was turning a bright red, and the two continued to laugh at him. The third child continued to giggle for a while after the fact. She had never quite figured out what they had been laughing at, but she had decided long ago that whatever the first child deemed funny must be hilarious. She jogged lightly after her two friends, dragging a stick she had found behind her. A frog hopped in between her feet, croaked once, then hopped away quickly so as not to be stepped on. The third child looked down, confused. She was certain her foot had just croaked. She told the others of this magical happenstance, but they didn't seem to believe her. "Why are you always saying the dumbest things to us?" one asked. "Yeah, why can't you ever talk about anything that makes sense?" said the other. "Well, she can sometimes, but only if someone else is at first," said the first. "You're so stupid," they yelled, and then they picked up stones and threw them at the child's feet. She didn't understand why they were doing this to her, especially after she had just explained to them that her feet were magical and could croak. Agitated, flustered, and confused, that is how they stayed. And the woman watched them through her white tablecloth, and she cried for them. Devious and fleeting, the rain left the three children and traveled east to the ocean. It bounded and leapt and joined forces with the waves below. It stirred all the fish around into a great soup, and in a cottage nearby there was fish soup stirring in a pot over a fire. This soup was being stirred by a wooden spoon, and attached to that spoon's handle was the withered hand of an old, tired lady. Her arm was sore from stirring, and her shoulders and back ached from bringing in wood for the fire. Her silver hair cascaded over her lined features, and if the ends of her hair got into the soup, she merely watched as they stirred and spiraled, becoming heavy with the thick broth. No one lived with her. No one came to visit her. The woman was alone like she had wanted when she was young, but had long since forgotten what all the fuss was about. The old woman continued to stir, hunched over the pot. It was the same recipe that her husband had used the night he proposed to her. The two of them had been young and in love, and the spark of disaster that was to come had never even crossed their minds. It was her fault, really, the whole thing, and now she envied her younger face. She hated it. The rain slept at dawn. It calmed down to a whisper and hushed its roaring mischief. As it napped, it dreamt sweet dreams of torment and anguish, and giggled in its sleep. Above this sleeping hurricane, angels giggled too. They tumbled over each other, they fell in love, they sang to one another, they poked at the sleeping storm, stirring it briefly from its slumber and laughing all the while. After they had had their fun, they kissed it back to sleep. The angels cuddled with it, nestling into its flurries and whispering, "I love you." The storm was at peace. They slept together for years, sharing their dreams with one another for their own enjoyment and smiling at the company they kept. The woman watched them in her tablecloth, and she wept at their innocence. Now the time had come for the storm to awaken. It kissed each angel goodbye and leapt from the heavens, its bluster growing and churning and intensifying with each mile. It stopped in an orchard where a blanket was set beneath a tree, and on that blanket sat two lovers. The two were looking at each other, staring into one another's eyes and simply enjoying the love that they shared between them, a lady and a gentleman, darling and beloved. "I can see that there is a storm coming," remarked Darling. "Yes, I see it reflecting in your elegant gaze," replied Beloved. "I am sad that we must leave this lovely place so soon," said Darling. "I wished so dearly to spend all night out here amongst the stars." Beloved took Darling's hand, gazing even deeper into her beautiful gray eyes. Your wish shall be granted, my darling, for I shall shield you with my body and protect you from the approaching storm. I shall watch over you as you sleep and make sure that nothing bothers you. No beast, no storm shall harm you as you rest, for I am in love with you, and I would sooner die than let this harsh world lay a finger on you. Darling blushed. Before this man, she had been her own protector. She had reveled in the power and ability that she had to control her own life, but she had been beaten. When her beloved had found her, wounded and thirsty for blood, he had tamed her. She loved him for showing what was right, what innocence was, what love meant. The storm came over them then, pelting their heads and dissolving the gaze that they shared. They could no longer see each other, but the man moved to shield the woman like he had promised. He covered her shivering frame with his body and held her as close as he could, but the tighter he held her, the less there was to hold. Her body was melting in his arms as if she had never been there, and all he could see was the watery blackness that covered everything. "Release me," he heard her whisper. The words tumbled around him, slipping their way deep inside of him as they consumed him. "Leave me alone." The voice was gushing now, swirling around and around, becoming one with the storm, one with his doubts. They engulfed him, destroyed him. "I've never loved you. You just wished me to. You've trapped me." The man cried, his tears mixing with the storm, fueling it. Her rage fueled the winds, and his sadness fueled the rains. A crack of lightning illuminated the world for a split second, and the man saw the woman's face It was as if it had aged 50 years in the span of 2 minutes. Her eyes were sunken, her skin drooped and fell off her cheekbones, and her once soft and voluminous hair thinned and shriveled. Her hair now disassembled. Wild. Another lightning strike, and her face was the only thing he could see. There was white all around her head, and her face looked surprised. The man and the storm faded into nothing as a single tear dripped down her withered face. The woman in the chair watched her, a tear mirroring that of the old lady's face. The white behind her head mirrored that of the lace tablecloth, and they were one.
I am a senior. My name is Laurel, and what I'm going to read is an excerpt from an untitled short story, the very beginning of it. Sunny days like these always taunted Eli, when the heat settles in the house and anyone can barely hear a phone ringing through the speaker. He wanted nothing more than to fold up some clothes and call someone to go swimming. Of course, the matter of who to call always left him standing leaning against the doorframe for minutes, blankly staring at the sun-dappled porch with peeling paint. His mother was out on a walk, his brother out of town, his father working upstairs. It occurred to him to ask his father what he thought he should do, then he thought better of it. He slid his sandals onto his feet, after a few tries, and went down the front walk, screen door swinging behind him. Walks through this neighborhood were one of the little pleasures of life that Eli avidly adored. In summer, especially, the grasses poking through the sidewalk cracks, and the thick breeze always commanded a special reverence from him. It wasn't summer, but it had seemed like the weather over spring break had been trying its hardest to mimic it. The blue crisscrossing shadows of gate fences and the hum of cars and insects were a lullaby. He hummed along as he kicked up bits of gravel. The late afternoon was hanging all around. The sun burned at his back. His feet swung like pendulums. The air was slowly growing cooler. He stopped in front of a house with a small front drive and an untrimmed lawn. There was a doorbell, rubbed down with time, but he didn't touch it. Instead, he took all the time in the world to meander up the narrow walkway. Wildflowers grew in a spread of mulch on either side of it. Parts of the sidewalk were wet, and there was a car in the back driveway. A hose lay abandoned in the grass. Sometimes a liberating pass. Finally, he made his way up the walk, posed uncertainly in front of the door, looked around him as if someone were watching, and pressed the doorbell. Its dull sound could be heard faintly within the house. A minute or so went by. When he was getting ready to back away from the door, footsteps sounded on an inside stairwell. The door swung open from within. He nearly jumped back. "Hey," said the girl who'd opened it. She was squinting. "Come on in." Her bare feet shuffled easily over the hardwood floor. The house was cool and dark, and some sunlight came in through slits in the blinds. They meandered through rooms thick with homely clutter and empty cracker boxes. She slumped onto a couch, rubbing her scalp through unruly hair. She was wearing an oversized sports shirt that nearly covered her gray shorts. A radio played softly in the background. You woke me up from a nap. I've been asleep almost afternoon. Her legs spread apart, each folded at the knee. Her head leaned back heavily on the cushion. Eli stayed standing, slowly inching toward her, away from the doorway. Oh, sorry. Ha, it's okay. Probably wouldn't have done anything if you hadn't come by. He moved to sit down on another part of the couch, and when she nodded in his direction, he settled. His arms rested uncertainly on his knees. His hands fidgeted. How have you been? She shrugged. Oh, you know, not too much happening. I got my job at the bakery, not much else. Mostly just been like this, lying around trying to not think about school. The house was very quiet. He could hear the air conditioner hum and the screen door out back creak slightly, then shut closed. It struck him now just how dim it was in the room, how hard it was to see her face as she tilted it back. She was the same as she'd always been. Though they weren't visible in the dark, he knew the freckles that were there, the small scrapes and scars, the wild assortment of flyaway hairs. When he caught himself staring, he felt her start to turn her head towards him and quickly looked away. He could still hear her breathing, familiar as his own. So, she began. Senior year, huh? More than halfway over. Yeah. Hear back from any other schools yet? Then she raised her eyebrows and huffed. Oh, right, you already know where you're going. Must be nice. He said nothing. Remembering her pulling out a crumpled official-seeming letter from her backpack one day, a few weeks back, and her reading aloud from it. Dear Ellen, we regret to inform you. He didn't meet her eyes. Her gaze drifted around the room. Anyway, she went on, my parents aren't here. They're traveling. Yeah? Yeah. So help yourself to anything in the fridge. What they don't know won't hurt them. Oh, he murmured. He made the slightest gesture to rise, and stopped himself. Okay. Do you want something? What? I'm all right. Just go ahead. Make a dinner out of candy and Chinese takeout. That's what I do. He wasn't sure if she was joking or not. Hesitantly, he moved to get up, encouraged to continue by a slight nod from her. Soon, he was softly padding towards the adjoining kitchen. It was only separated from the room she was in by a counter. Stained glass ornaments of birds hung in the windows over the sink. Allie, he said quietly. Yeah? Do you have any dried apricots? Out on the counter near the cutting boards. Oh, thank you.